Welcome inside for another edition of WCBL Report. Of course, the playoffs are upon us. It's postseason baseball time across the prairies, and we're going to bring in right away to kick off this show my co-host for today's episode, Joe McFarland, of course. Joe, it's playoff baseball time. There are four great matchups staring us in the face. It's an exciting time of year after what was a pretty wild, I'll say, regular season for a few different reasons. But first of all, before we dive into the playoffs, why don't you give me your reflections on this regular season? And then we can jump into the matchups from there.
Yeah, the first thought is, and then there were eight, although right up until Monday afternoon, Monday evening, we didn't necessarily know who those eight were going to be. We knew seven of the eight. And to your point, kind of a wild and wacky turn of events, especially given the wedges. And I think we ended on 33 weather related delays, cancellations, etc. throughout the season, which is second only to 2010 when there's 35, at least in WCBL, WMBL recorded history is concerned, anyways. So, big kudos. I said it the last couple of weeks. I'm going to continue it. Massive kudos to the grounds crews who did the best that they possibly could given the conditions, and the schedule makers because it felt like they had to do a lot of Jenga building over the course of the last few weeks to make especially the last couple of weeks happen. But I mean, there's some great play on the field, and as much as there was, especially in the East, some distance that was between, say, Saskatoon and Medicine Hat versus the five and six ranked teams, it felt again like any team could beat any other team on any given night. We even saw it at the end of the season there, and it just feels like the margin for error is ever so slim in the WCBL, and especially in the West this year, right? Is when you've got that race for first place coming down to last week, that race for the fourth final playoff spot coming down to the very last day. It was on the edge of your seat for the entire season.
Yeah, and like you said, the battle in the West, there's some confusion or some questions, I guess, about how that West division really finished off that fourth and final playoff spot. If you were paying attention, as the fans I'm talking to here, there was some issues with Fort McMurray. There was an appeal process, a bunch of behind the scenes stuff, which I'm not going to get into on this show. But end of the day, Brooks won their way into that fourth and final playoff spot, earned the right to play Okotoks in the first round, and it's going to be awesome to see how they perform. Just because they won 6 of the last 10 games in order to get that playoff spot. So they, like I said, they earned their way into it. They definitely deserve it, and it's going to be really interesting, like I said, to see how they can face up against an Okotoks team that's loaded and ready to go for another a deep playoff run, as they've done almost every single year over the last half decade or so. So, Joe, why don't we take a look at the bracket? I'm going to let you break down the matchups on an overview sense. Give me just a quick breakdown here, and then we're going to dive in a little bit deeper on each matchup after that. Go for it.
The biggest thing that stands out to me is every single matchup in these four playoffs happen to have some level of intrigue to it. Whether it's as much as you look at those 1 versus 4 matchups and go, "Oh man, like this on paper looks like it should be a cakewalk for the one team." The four teams are coming off some pretty strong endings to the season, and I've said this time and time again, is it's not necessarily how you do during the course of the entire summer, but how you manage to finish off the regular season. And if you're the hottest team coming into the playoffs, you can continue that into a strong playoff run. So don't discount the Moose John Miller Express. Don't discount Bombers, and I'm sure the Saskatoon Berries and Okotoks Dogs are fully aware, given some of the track records in the last year or two. And then obviously the 2 versus 3, and we're going to get into it. Both of those matchups are so tight, are just so tight, and it's going to be as long as nothing unforeseen happens. I foresee both of those going the distance just because of how tight they were during the course of the regular season.
Yeah, well, like you said, Joe, looking at the standings coming into the playoffs, Moose Jaw was the hottest team going into the playoffs, along with Brooks. And you're talking about both of the fourth place teams. They were two of the hottest teams in the league heading into the final week. So it's going to be interesting. There is no easy outs, I don't think, this year in the WCBL, and it's going to be fun to watch. But why don't we dive in to the matchups themselves? We're going to start in the West Division. We'll start with the 1 versus 4 matchup, Okotoks versus Brooks. Again, Okotoks multiple time champion in this league, looking for another one. Brooks looking to kind of be that scrappy underdog, of course. But as you can see, the head-to-head matchup this year heavily leaned in the direction of the Okotoks Dogs. 8 wins in 10 games against Brooks, and they heavily outscored them, more than doubling the run totals, 99-41. And we'll start, Joe, kind of breaking down the Brooks Bombers. Let's have a look at their hitting leaders, and I'll let you break these guys down. Yeah, to me, every time I talk about Brooks, it's those first two guys. CJ Snowden, though, he really was a crucial part, especially in the stolen base department in terms of this batting order. But what do you see when you look at Brooks's batting order?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up CJ Snowden, because that has been sort of the theme that I saw out of the Brooks Bombers this year. Is every year it seems though they've got 2 or 3 guys who are at the top of the home run charts in the WCBL. Obviously, that short porch at Elks Field plays to their benefit. Now, this year, they didn't necessarily have that. Like, they had Wyatt Ormonde, they had Peyton Matthews, who had 7 or 8 bombs apiece, but it wasn't like anybody was running around with 13 or 14 like they've done in the past. This is a more well balanced offense for the Brooks Bombers, and they have a little bit of speed with Snowden, with Matthews, with Ben Fischel's been very good on the base paths as well. This is a team that will quietly kind of peck away at you. And if you rewind the tape to last year during the playoffs, they were the 4 seed against Sylvan Lake, and everybody's going, you've got a Sylvan Lake team that's set the WCBL record for home for wins in a season, and somehow they've managed to. You'd think that they're actually going to go in and sweep this thing without a contest, and it was 4-0, and I think 4-2 in those 2 matchups. And so don't take the Bombers for granted in any stretch. And part of that is because of that well-balanced offensive machine.
Yeah, and I think the biggest storyline with the Brooks Bombers, as we switch to the pitching graphic now, is that they had some good hitters and solid offensive output. But when you look at their pitching numbers, it's a little bit scary coming into a playoff matchup against a really heavy hitting a really heavy hitting Okotoks team. Joe, are you worried about when you see these ERA numbers? Is that something that worries you going into a playoff stretch, or is it kind of a brand new season and we're back at 0 ERAs and you're not overly worried about it?
Yeah, I think it's back to 0 ERAs, because certain guys can elevate their game and certain guys all of a sudden fall off a cliff, right? And so it depends again on with the Bombers is how they manage their time, particularly with their starters, and how they want to get to their all-star closer. Heath Hatchkowski, a Red Deer product, was an all-star, 3-1, 1.86 ERA in 12 games, closed them all out, had 3 saves, struck out 32 in 19 plus innings. So this is a guy who they will probably lean on heading into the postseason, assuming that he doesn't have to go back to college, which is another X factor when it comes to playoff time in the WCBL. But it's going to be about that pitching matchup, and also the pitching management that comes with the Brooks Bombers. And as much as these numbers you look at them, that's a lot of 6s, a lot of 7s, a lot of 8s. It can easily become 2s and 3s if you manage to get a good 4 innings out of a starter, and then a couple innings here and a couple innings there. It's going to be maybe the bread and butter of what Brooks wants to do heading into this first round playoff matchup with Okotoks.
Yeah, exactly. And we're talking about, you get one good outing from a starting pitcher, you get one good outing from a reliever, and all of a sudden that's a win for you. And then you're moving on to the next day. You're talking about 48 hours of just being precise and being accurate and hitting your spots as a pitcher. And then all of a sudden you might be moving on. You might be the upset team here. So Brooks could very well be that team this year. It's going to be very interesting to see if they can hold off as we move into Okotoks and talking about the Dogs lineup now, their hitting lineup. It's kind of a murderer's row to an extent, Joe. I mean, they have a lot of really heavy hitting guys. They have a lot of guys at the top of the batting average list. They have some guys at the top of the power list. They have some guys at the top of the RBI list. This is not a Dogs team that you can at all take lightly, which I wouldn't expect anyone to take them lightly. But just saying, you have to be on your A game for this team in order to get past them if you have any hope of getting past this Okotoks Dogs team.
Yeah, and the big thing with Okotoks that they really showcased a couple of years ago in their final series, 2023 against Medicine Hat, is even if you do see, say, a Ricky Sanchez or a Logan Grant go back to school for their fall semester, they've got a bounty of young players as affiliates who seemingly come in and do amazing work. You look at that year; it was a couple of young men, a couple of Erics actually, Eric Matchy and Eric Hartman, who were fresh out of high school or just still in high school, who did a lot of really good work in some really crucial spots for the Dogs. And chances are they're going to be doing that again this year. They're going to lean on a couple of their younger arms, for example, who were really outstanding at the end of the season. And I think the same is going to hold true when it comes to batting. Although, by all accounts, a guy like Barry Eisman, for example, missed out on last year's playoff run. He says, I'm not doing that again. And he wants to be here for the full run. Connor Croson, no doubt about it. He is, even though he's transferring to a new school, I have no doubt in my mind that he wants to be the hero again after what he did in 2024. You've got some new faces in there as well with Zane Scanzi and Jake Skaggs. I mean, this is to your point, a very loaded offensive team with some guys who can hit for power, hit for average, get on base, drive in runs, and it's very easy to look up at a tie ball game early in the ball game, and then all of a sudden they put up a 5 spot without you even blinking. So the Dogs can be very vaunted, and it's going to be a challenge for those Brooks hurlers for sure.
Yeah, and big shout out to just the last guy to Nash Kroll. You mentioned him. We were talking about him before the show started. Of course, he was the participant in the home run derby. Did quite well there as well in the All Star weekend. And he's another guy who's just like you can't overlook him. You're gonna get past your top 2 or 3 hitters, and then there's Nash Kroll, and he's like you said, he can be that kind of guy, one swing of the bat type of damage. That's him. So very very strong lineup. As we move into the pitching group here, the pitching staff. It's another really really good group. You see these numbers, you see all the we were talking about Brooks Bombers and the 6s and 7s. Look at all the 3s, look at all the 2s, look at the 4s. Like these are guys that they have a really solid staff from the first inning to the ninth inning, and it's going to be really tough to get a whole lot of runs off of these guys.
Some veterans, right? When you think about Brody Forno, Ryan McFarland's not on that list, but he's another guy that they consistently go to in big moments. And as an example, Ryan McFarland, I remember I can't remember if it was 2022 or 2023, generally a reliever, comes in as a starter during the championship series and throws 7 innings of great ball, right? And that seems to be the go-to for the Dogs coaching staff is, hey, who's feeling it today? Who's primed? Who's got, because of their depth, they haven't necessarily used a lot of innings on their pitchers, so they can go, hey, maybe we can push you for 5 or 7. I mentioned Preston Toshnik is another guy. I was at the Saskatoon Okotoks game back on July 16th, and this kid impressed me. He's just freshly out of the Dogs Academy program. Just looking at his numbers, 5 1/3, allows 4 hits against the vaunted Saskatoon offense. The Dogs win that one 9-5. He struck out 4 and faced 19 batters in that contest. He's started in 3 straight games now. He went Sylvan Lake June 4th, Saskatoon July 16th, and then August 2nd against Lethbridge. Picks up the win in 2 of the Dogs won 3 of those games. He's a guy that quietly might be able to do some damage for this team, especially in the early going before, if he has to end up going down to, I believe it's Panola College.
Well, there you go, and like I said, it's going to be a very important for those. It's going to be very important for those Brooks Bombers to try to get on the board early, because if they can't, the longer these guys go, they get more comfortable, and then those bullpen guys come in, and they're just as dangerous as you mentioned for Okotoks. So for this series, what do you think the keys are for either team, Joe, as we kind of enter tonight's action for Game 1?
It's obviously a little David versus Goliath, right? There's that feeling of, okay, Brooks is the underdog, and I think they like that. They don't have anything to lose at this point, and so the key is play these guys hard, play the way that you've been playing. You've done really well in the last little bit. You came away with, I think, 3 or 4 wins in Fort Mac as an example. You split against Lethbridge. You can play with the big dogs, literally and figuratively. So go do that. Keep doing that. Let the big dog
Hey,
eat. And on
good
the
job,
other side of
Bryce.
things, for the Okotoks Dogs, just keep doing what you're doing, right? This is a very quiet division leading Okotoks Dogs team. They didn't get a lot of the press that they normally do because of how good Saskatoon was. So for the Okotoks Dogs, just a matter of like, you don't ruin what's already been going well for you. There's that one question mark about the starting pitching and who's going to get starts, but usually around playoff time they seem to always figure it out. And so I have no doubt that Lou Pote and Mitch Schmidt have a game plan built out for tonight and going forward, and it should be a pretty good contest between Okotoks and Brooks.
Yeah, and like you said, just thinking back now, all the way back to my preseason chat with Brooks coach Dylan DeBrouwer, he did say, "Yeah, we're going to be a scrappy team. We're going to do things. We're going to play small ball. We're going to do the little things." And I think manufacturing runs with the speed that they have on the base paths could be the key to their offense. If they can get that going, maybe they can sneak out a win in game one or two, and then force a game three. That would be huge for them to just give themselves a chance. Whether it's sneaking out a win, like I said, in game one, or coming back in game two and getting a win at home and pushing it to that third game, or who knows, we'll see. But it's going to be a fun series regardless. Of course, that starts tonight, game one at Siemens Stadium in Okotoks. Game two will be tomorrow night at Elks Field in Brooks, and then if necessary, game three back in Okotoks on Friday night. We're going to move on now, Joe, to the other series in the West. And when I say other series, this could be the series in the West. These are two teams that are poised. They both have the weapons to push deep into a playoff run, but they're going to have to face each other. And one of these teams is going to lose in the first round. It's Lethbridge, not the number 3 seed, versus Sylvan Lake, the number 2 seed. As you can see, and you mentioned it, Joe, in the preamble for our opening segment, this series is about as close as it could possibly get. The runs for and against, in terms of Sylvan Lake having 62, Lethbridge having 51 in the 4-4 season series split. That's probably due to a couple of shutouts late in the season. Otherwise, this would be almost dead even, Joe. This is quite the series we have on our hands.
Yeah, and those two games, Sylvan won 12-0 and 7-0 in those contests. Again, late in the season. And in talking with Lethbridge Bulls coaching staff this year, one of the things that they said, and even the players admit, their offense has been kind of streaky. When they're good, when they're rolling, that's a tough offense to beat. But when they're cold, they're quietly cold. And then all of a sudden, no matter how good your pitch, which I would argue Lethbridge top to bottom might have one of the best pitching staffs in the WCBL this season, you can't win a game 0-0. And so all of a sudden the onus is going to fall on some of those batters, and especially the guys like the Bernie Sakaroses of the group that have good batting averages to get on base, and then they got to start cashing in some runs. And I know we're going to be looking at some of the leaders in that in just a second, but it's
Yeah,
going
we
to
can we
be
can bring
that
those in
kind of
now, actually, as we get this conversation going. Let's bring them in
yeah,
now. The
and for
Lethbridge
the
hitters.
Silver
Yeah,
Lake
let's have a
Gulls,
look.
that's going to be the key. Is they're a well-oiled machine that is well-rounded, right? And so if Sylvan Lake's one of the best teams post Canada Day, so how do the Lethbridge Bulls handle that side of things? And so when you look at the bat example, one guy we keep talking about is Carter Clarehout, mainly because we know he's watching. He always does, but he had a phenomenal season. But when you look up and down this list, whether it's Jack Kaliski, whether it's Bernie Sakara, Masaki. This is a 1 through 9 group that is very capable of putting up runs and putting up runs fast. The problem is they'll get batters on, and then all of a sudden, a couple of strikeouts later, and the threat is thwarted, right? And so for Lethbridge Bulls, I think the key is going to be that risp, the runners in scoring position, get them across the plate, and put some pressure on that Sylvan Lake Gulls offense to do some damage on the other side against a very, very good pitching staff for the Lethbridge Bulls.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like you said, Lethbridge, they have those big bats. It's just a matter of stringing some hits together. And maybe, you know what, it's playoff time, it's crunch time. Maybe focusing more on the small ball aspect of things rather than trying to put the big swings up on the board as much as possible. And like you said, it sometimes seems like Lethbridge is in the boom or bust category. So let's try to even that out. Let's balance that out. Let's try to get like you said, a 1 through 9 approach with that lineup, and we'll see what they can do. But like you said, there are some big bats. They're capable of putting up big numbers. It's just going to be a matter of, can they do it now in the playoffs against a very, very tough Sylvan Lake team. There's Bernie Sakaris. We talked about him. Of course, he was the batting champion this year, leading the league in batting average. Not setting a record necessarily, but a 405 average is nothing to sneeze at, Joe. What a player Bernie Sakaris for the Lethbridge Bulls. Such an important part, and he's going to be such an important part of this playoff lineup as well.
Absolutely. And again, a guy that's at the top of the batting order, a guy that you're going to be depending on to have that similar kind of number. You want him on base 2 or 3 times a game, and he's going to be leaned on very heavily heading into this against a team that doesn't necessarily have the pitching stardom that maybe you have, but they're a very capable pitching staff over in Sylvan Lake. So it's going to be, again, this is a very, very good matchup, and I'm really excited about how this is all going to play out.
Well, let's look at the pitchers for Lethbridge as we see, like you said, they have maybe arguably the best pitching staff in the league this year. And it starts at the top with Levi Abbott, second in the league in strikeouts, and top of the league in ERA. An amazing summer from him. And a great story as well. But it wasn't just him. It was throughout their pitching staff that they were able to play really good shutdown baseball throughout the entire summer, Joe.
And as we've mentioned before, pitching can win you a championship, right? When you've got guys who can give you 6 or 7 innings every single night, like a Levi, like a Maxim Marakovich, like a Brett Getz, that's a really formidable three-headed tandem there. And in talking to some of the coaches around the league, this is maybe the pitching staff that nobody wants to face right now is the Lethbridge Bulls. You add in a Sam Herrera, and then you go down and you've got some good middle reliever guys who have done the job, and you get to Donovan Gomez, who has been Mr. Shutdown, led the league in saves this year. Once you get to him, it's pretty much a done deal. And so for the Sylvan Lake Gulls, they don't want to get to that point. They don't want to see that closer into the ball game. So you got to get to those guys, those starters early and often if you want to have a chance at beating the Lethbridge Bulls in this postseason.
Well, let's take a look at Sylvan Lake's batting order and who might be doing that and who might be making it tough on those Lethbridge Bulls pitchers. This is a nicely balanced lineup, Joe, top to bottom. There's a lot of important players, and you can see a very balanced in terms of batting average lineup. You don't see a ton of, top heavy type of stuff. It seems very balanced, maybe one of the more balanced lineups in the league.
Yeah, absolutely. And balance is probably the perfect way of putting it because the Sylvan Lake Gulls kind of took a bit of a chapter out of the Okotoks Dogs book from a pitching staff perspective. Is we're used to seeing Ty Boudreau, Josh Tucker, and their starters going 6 or 7 and just absolutely dominating. While Tucker's still there, Boudreau's been gone since the middle part of July, if memory serves, or right before the draft, obviously, when he signed his free agent deal with the New York Yankees. The Sylvan Lake Gulls have had the embarrassment of riches the last few years from a pitching staff perspective. Instead, what they've done has been very methodical about, okay, we're going to get our starter to go 5 or 6, and then we've got a reliever for the 7th, we got a reliever for the 8th, and a reliever for the 9th. And they've been very good there, as you can see with the numbers there. On the batting side of things, it's the same kind of thing. Last year, they had Cooper Sazelski, who was an absolute beast, who went on to be the league MVP. This year, they don't have anybody that's necessarily in that same realm, but they've just got a bunch of guys who are doing things really, really well. And a couple of guys that are late season acquisitions that I think a lot of people should be paying attention to. One was at the top of that batter order list with Cleary Simpson. He's a veteran who's just come back, hometown kid. I think it's Elnora, Alberta. He's going to be a guy that has kind of quietly just been brought back into the fold. Another guy, a former Brooks Bomber who won the batting title last year, Anthony Gilbert from Quebec. He's back with Sylvan Lake Gulls this year. Again, hard to tell whether, not sure exactly whether or not these guys are going back to college or if but given that they're late season acquisitions, I assume they're here for the rest of the summer. So those are a couple of really big acquisitions that add to an already vaunted offense with the Jaden Flores's and the Brock DeJournas and the Simon Bakers of the group.
Yeah, and we look at the pitching staff one more time just as we kind of move along here. And one name that stands out to me is Joshua Tucker. And the reason for that, Joe, and as we look at the next graphic here, is this guy is the all-time WCBL strikeout king. And tell me why. Why is he so successful? How is he able to set this record?
Let's rewind the tape to last summer, the playoffs, game 1 against the Brooks Bombers, and Josh Tucker comes out and fires a complete game shutout, 4-0 victory over the Brooks Bombers. I believe he struck out 14 in that contest, if memory serves. He just has a really good mix of hard throwing, flame throwing fastball with a good mix of off speed and keeps batters on their toes consistently. And he's a guy who's a veteran of the league. He's been around basically since day one with the Sylvan Lake Gulls dating back to 2021. He overtakes long time. I joke around that he was 37 years old when he graduated, but Graham Brunner of the Okotoks Dogs was a stud when he came in 2018, 2019 as a high schooler, and then was here basically from 2021 to 2024 and was racking. He became Mr. Okotoks on the mound for a reason. And so congratulations to Josh Tucker on overcoming that and overtaking Graham Brunner as the strikeout king in the WCBL, because that's a pretty good feat given he's only been in the league now for his 5th season.
Yeah, it's going to be an awesome series. And I think for the keys to this matchup, Joe, I'm just going to go ahead and say it's two good pitching staffs, it's two good batting orders. It's just going to be, whoever gets hot at the right time and plays the best 2 games or 3 games between these two teams. It honestly, either team could win this. I think it's neck and neck. It's about as close as you can get. I think it's the tightest series, I believe, in the playoffs this year. So it's going to be super, super fun to keep an eye on those games throughout the next few days. Game one is tonight in Sylvan Lake at Gulls Field. Game two tomorrow, of course, in Lethbridge at Spitz Stadium. And then game three Friday night, if necessary, back in Sylvan Lake. So it's going to be a great 3 games. Joe, let's move on to the East Division as we start with the Saskatoon Berries. Of course, the record-setting Saskatoon Berries and the Moose Jaw Miller Express. Now this is a series, you mentioned it. No easy outs. There is no way that this season series, as you see, a 7-1 Saskatoon Berries edge in the season series, 81-43. But Moose Jaw coming into the playoffs, the hottest team. So this happened last year too. We have to remember last year Regina was the first place team in the East. They played Moose Jaw in the first round, and Moose Jaw was one of the hotter teams going into the playoffs, and they were able to surprise the Regina Red Sox last year in the first round and make a deep playoff run into the finals. Maybe another chance for them to do that this year, but look at this. They're coming up against literally the best team in WCBL history in the Saskatoon Berries, who are 46-9. Of course, passing Sylvan Lake from last season, 44 wins last year, 46 wins this year, Joe. So again, it's going to be a bit of what we talked about with Okotoks and Brooks, maybe not to the extent of the David and Goliath over there, but at the same time, we're talking about literally the best team ever in this league. So what are you expecting from this series, just as an overview of this series?
I suspect Eric Marriott loves playing the role. I assume he would love to be the home team for the home field advantage for a series or two instead of having to be the underdog consistently. But it seems like it's a role that he's okay with because they're a scrappy bunch. And again, this is a team that going into the year, I remember during our season preview show, Ian and I talked to you about maybe there's a drop off this year with Moose Jaw Miller Express because you no longer have that two-headed beast known as Nate Mensick and Austin Gurney. Mensick graduated, Gurney's back again. How does that get impacted? Well, you know what? They've just decided that they're going to make a three-headed monster because you have Thomas Soto now part of that roster, and you also have William Edwards, who's been a phenomenal addition to this team, adding some power, providing some run support, and now all of a sudden, this is an offense that has been very underrated in the WCBL East because of what Saskatoon has done. And if they can get to Saskatchewan early, then all bets are off, and all of a sudden everybody's going to be looking over their shoulder, going, "Is Moose Jaw going to do this all over again?" And all you need to do is look at this graphic here, and you can see again Thomas Soto setting the league record for I believe it was runs scored this year. Austin Gurney's there, William Edwards is there, and they're just so well balanced across. Eduardo Saenz is another example of a guy who they just do their thing, and they not a lot of 250s in there, right? There's a lot of 300s in there, and if they're going to be successful against the Saskatoon Berries pitching staff and defense, they're going to have to continue hitting at that clip, and they're going to have to be a tough out. And it's not going to be a matter of, hey, we can just homer our way out of this. It's going to be, we got to nickel and dime, and come away with victories. And that's something that you saw in the regular season matchup with Saskatoon as well. As Moose Jaw won both of their games by 1 run. It's not going to be a blowout. You just have to trust the process, trust that you can get one more run than the other team.
Yeah, well, like you said, this was a record-setting or record-tying lineup, as we can see at this next graphic here. We got William Edwards tying the league record, I believe, for RBIs. You mentioned Thomas Soto setting a league record for runs scored, and I think we have a graphic for that. There it is. Ties the WCBL record for RBIs. He had 86 hits this year. Thomas Soto, WCBL record for runs. So these guys find a way. And how many times this season where you weren't sure if they even had a chance against a certain team, and then I would check their Instagram or their Twitter page later that night, and they walked it off in extra innings, or they scrapped their way to a comeback or some sort of dramatic comeback in the ninth. This is the way that this Moose Jaw Miller Express team plays. This is the way Eric Marriott coaches, and like you said, I think, and I think you kind of mentioned it, but I think this is a perfect opponent for Saskatoon because as we look at Saskatoon's, we'll go over to their side of things now. record-setting team. Top of the leaderboards in almost every category, pitching and hitting. Look at this hitting lineup. But I feel like this Moose Jaw team is perfectly constructed to just scrap their way to close games and keep it close with a team like this. What do you think about that? And then go ahead and dive into this batting order that is dangerous 1 through 9.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at Moose Jaw's pitching staff, they're going to have their hands full because 1 through 9, you don't know exactly who's going to hit where. There were nights where Carter Beck was hitting seventh. There were nights where Ethan Menard is hitting fourth. Also, nights where Carter Beck's hitting first and Ethan Menard's hitting second. I suspect Joe Carnahan is going to have a pretty set in stone lineup heading into the playoffs. But when you've got Menard, Beck, Corey Waters isn't on this list, but somehow he's right up in there as far as one of the home run leaders across the league. Oh, he is. He's third. Joe can't read apparently right now. Ethan Murdoch, Nathan Houston. Like you've got some veterans in there who've been through the ringer. Balin Sorensen is back after missing the first little bit of the season. Jalen Freeman's missed a few games. He's going to be back. Like this is a team that is just built to run over teams. Now, that being said, Moose Jaw's pitching staff, like I said, they're going to have their hands full, but they also have the league strikeout leader in Weston Walls, who has done nothing but damage to batting orders all season long. I think he had, 89 strikeouts this year. Yes, that ERA, he'd like to have a little bit lower. A lot of these guys would probably like to have their ERAs lower, but the same kind of thing as what happened with Brooks. Set this all aside. You've all got zeros heading in the postseason, and all you need is one big outing, and you're going to look like an all-star coming into this playoff run.
Yeah, and as we look at Moose Jaw's pitching, because of course I skipped over it, we can't skip over Moose Jaw's pitching. But the two names that really stand out, of course, you mentioned Weston Walls, the league strikeout leader. Nathan Pizzio has been really, really solid at the end of games as well as kind of a closer for Moose Jaw. So I'm gonna go ahead out on a limb here, Joe, and say we might see Weston Walls. We probably will see Weston Walls game 1. We might see Weston Walls in a scenario where there's a game 3. That's the type of kind of workhorse type of pitcher he is, and if he has the right stuff and he's punching guys out, that's going to be a huge potential. That's where I'm seeing this potential upset kind of thing, where a guy like Weston Walls can take over a game. But let's skip over now to the Saskatoon pitching staff because they also have some solid guys on there. They don't have a depth issue. Their depth is deep, so they don't have an issue there. Where do you see this pitching staff, and how do you view this pitching staff?
It's actually kind of amazing to think that you've got a WCBL veteran in Matt Whitney who spent a few years in Fort McMurray, comes back here, has become kind of the rock star of that line of that starting rotation, just provides that you're getting 6 innings out of him. Right. And that's the kind of thing that you need for especially heading into a playoff run. And then you've got kind of the polar opposite guy with a guy like Merrick Yeager, who's freshly out of high school and doing and pulling up the kinds of innings that he was able to pull out. And again, as much as you look at that 5.10 ERA and go, ooh, that's not great, it's pretty darn good for a heavy league, one. And two, a kid who's 19 years old. So pretty outstanding there. And again, you go through that list and some guys who ate up some valuable innings for a team that didn't necessarily play from behind a whole lot during the course of this season. And so they just ate up innings and did what they had to do. You're going to be looking at a guy like Clevert Martina, maybe even a Matthias Tronsen, and going, hey, these are guys that you're going to need to maybe pick up their game just a little bit more heading into the playoffs if you want to go deep.
Yeah, such an impressive team. And, Ethan Menard, MVP candidate. Carter Beck, it's funny, coming into the season, I think we all in the season preview show said that Carter Beck's probably going to be MVP. There's like 2 or 3 guys, I would say, ahead of him almost on this Barry's roster that I could say might be MVPs. And he's like the third or fourth option, which that's almost the best problem you can possibly have. Carter Beck I'm going to call him a generational talent, especially Saskatchewan born, hometown kid, kind of not from the area necessarily, but Saskatchewan born. So great story there. And it's going to be wild to see if this Moose Jaw team, like we said, can scrap their way to keep these games close and then strike, because that just seems what they've been doing. Seems like they've been doing that all year, to keep it close, and then strike. So we're going to have to see. It's going to be a fun series. Is there any keys to this that you can see other than anything we already talked about, Joe?
I think for the Moose Jaw Miller Express, they are now the reigning Trans Canada Clash champions as they beat out the beat out the Regina Red Sox. So play off of that a little bit. You've got some momentum going into the postseason. You've gotten some big wins over the course of the last few weeks here. capitalize on that. I mean, they have their annual end of year banquet and awards that they have at the Pizio House, and have some fun there. And just a lot of team bonding tends to happen this time of year in Moose Jaw, which is always seems to play to their benefit over the last 3 years in particular. When you look at 2 out of 3 WCBL championship visits, so Eric Marriott knows what he's talking about. So it's just a matter of everybody buying in there and saying, believe in ourselves. For the Saskatoon Berries, they looked beatable weirdly in the second half. And when you think about, they go out for a road trip to Alberta, they split with Okotoks, they split with Lethbridge, and then they lose 2 of 3 2 of 3 from Regina. All of a sudden, you've got to kind of get back into the driver's seat a little bit here if you're Saskatoon. And I have no doubt that Joe Carnahan, who's won a few of these things before, is going to be pressing home the message of, hey, let's get back to what made us successful, especially in the first 6 weeks of the regular season.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned a team that went 46-9 looking beatable, but when 5 or 6 or 7 of your losses come in the last few weeks, then it looks a lot different in that regard. They didn't spread them out throughout the year. They a lot of their, over half their losses kind of came in the last couple of 3 weeks. So it's going to be interesting. Like you said, I think it's just a matter of everybody getting back into the groove. Maybe they took their foot off the gas a little bit because they basically clinched first place like what was it 3 weeks ago. Like they've been fine for a while, so now crank it back up, get back into game time, get back into that playoff mode. And I'm not overly worried about it at all. I think they got enough dogs on that team that they'll be all right. But it's going to be interesting to see. Like I said, I think this is going to be a really, really interesting series to watch, just because I think Moose Jaw is one of those teams that can do it again, just like they did last year. But let's move over to that other series, and this one's very tight. It's going to be an interesting one because there's been some roster shifting, I think, on the Regina side of things. They played extremely close, if not, maybe Regina had the edge during the regular season. As you see the run totals there, 59-45 for Regina, dead even in terms of wins. Medicine Hat, though, they've kept their roster largely together for the entire season, whereas Regina had a big turnover about a month ago, and they've had to fill some holes with some new guys and with some existing guys that were already there. And in fairness, they all stepped up really well. But is that going to be a case of chemistry? Is that going to be a case of all those kinds of things, right? Let's start with Regina and look at their hitting lineup, Joe, because like I said, there were some guys in there that aren't on this list anymore. So maybe you might see some names where you're like, hey, where don't isn't Jackson Searing on this list? Isn't Jalen Seward on this list? No, they're gone. There's some other guys that have really stepped up, though, especially on the left side there. You see Brady By, Matthew Fox. Those two guys really stepped up. Raphael Jackson started the season as kind of their 7, 8, 9 hitter, ended up the season in their top 3 every night and had some huge hits. So it's a really, really interesting case study for this Regina Red Sox team this year, Joe, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And I think the one thing that they took away from last year is, hey, you can win all the games during the regular season all you want, but if that doesn't mean nothing in the first round. And I have no doubt that Ryan Company in Regina have their eye on, hey, let's not happen last year happen this year. And I was talking to Brady By near the end of the season, their All-Star game, and we talked about that. And he says they've got a bitter taste in their mouth. Any of the veterans who are still kicking around, they don't like how last year ended. And so they've really been pressing that point and saying, listen, we've got to step up. This is where things get really tough. It's not going to be, no team is an easy out. You can't take an off day because you take an off day off tonight, for example, you're down one backs against the wall. I hate using cliches like that, but here we go already because it's playoff time. That's going to be the key theme moving forward is wipe this slate clean. You might not have the guys who are used to having 200 plus at bats and about 400 averages, but you can in the playoffs. So let's get to it. And that's going to be the key for Regina is maybe saying, listen, we had some success in the latter half of the season. Let's go with that and not focus on who we might have had.
Exactly. And the same goes for their pitching staff as well. As we switch over to that pitching staff. And again, 3 of maybe the best pitchers in the league, I would argue, Joe. We got, they had Colton Anderson, of course, pitcher of the year last year. He's no longer with them. Kai Langford was having an amazing start to the season. He's no longer with them. And Blake Johnson was leading the league in ERA for the first half of the season. He's no longer with them. So do they have the horses in the bullpen and with the pitching staff to compete with a team like Medicine Hat?
Well, it all depends on how these pitchers approach each game, right? Chris Spry had some pretty good outings when he came to Regina. Aiden Page has had some good outings. Vittorio Iacobucci, same kind of thing. So it's just a matter of being able to seize the moment to a certain extent with this team, and maybe weathering the storm a little bit, because we're going to get to the Medicine Hat lineup in a second. But that's a very good 1 through 9 batting order. You don't get to take a break during it, and so if you can weather the storm through 4, 5, 6 innings and turn it over to the bullpen that has been very good for Regina, then you start to feel some momentum getting underneath of you. And hey, we don't have to focus on, again, you're not focusing on who could have been here. You're focusing on who's here in the moment now. And maybe there's a little bit of, I don't want to call it animosity. Maybe there's a little bit of, hey, let's prove everybody wrong with this team, because there is so much talk about how many people they've lost during the course of the season.
Right. It's kind of going to be like it's proving grounds time, I think, for a lot of this Regina Red
Mhm.
Sox team. And we can go back to that Medicine Hat graphic, guys, because we'll just go right into it. There's a lot of weapons on this offense. This was a team that was putting up major runs totals in the first. What was it, like, month of the season? They were putting double digits up every single night. And a guy like Carter Roth, we all thought he might win the batting title. It slipped a little bit, but I think that's more just like his sample size growing. He was hitting like 450 for a bunch of the season. So obviously that is going to balance out eventually. But Tyler Vanesti, huge home run numbers. The Volcanoes, Evan Morrison had a big season. Micah Dvorak had a huge season, despite being a 263 average. Doesn't look that impressive, but he had a great season. So a lot of really good weapons in this batting order for Medicine Hat.
Yeah, it's just a matter, I think, of just trusting yourselves enough to go back to that place that you were at earlier on in the season. To your point, a Carter Roth, a Micah Dvorak, those guys kind of cooled off near the end of the season there. And actually, it's kind of the polar opposite of what we've seen out of Medicine Hat the last couple of years. But I think they can turn it on in the matter of a moment. This team under Coach Thornhill has really been able to kind of galvanize around themselves. There was a talk at one point, middle of July, where they were like, hey, are we going to slip into third or maybe fourth because of how things have fallen? And they started to pick things back up again. And to your point, you've got some veterans. You've got some guys who've been around the block a little bit with Tyler Van Este, the Volcanoes, Evan Morrison. They know that town. They know what that town wants, and they can't wait to be in front of a jam-packed athletic park, because that crowd has been rambunctious all year long, and it's only going to get ramped up again come playoff time.
Yeah, Athletic Park, one of my favorite parks in the prairies. I've played there a couple times over my years back in the day. Of course, we're talking years ago here, but I love that park, and it's going to be a great environment there for playoff baseball. And I think the same goes for Regina as well. The Regina baseball community always steps up come playoff time, and I think it's going to be two of maybe the best environments, I think, in the East especially, but in the playoffs it's going to be great. Let's have a look at the Medicine Hat pitching staff just to kind of wrap things up here. Luis Diaz leads the way in terms of just how shut down he has been all year. Actually, funny story. I believe you put out an MVP vote on Twitter not that long ago,
Mhm.
Joe, and Xander Roberts actually replied and said Luis Diaz should be in the conversation. And I said, Xander, you've also had a really good season. You might be in the conversation too. I just thought that was pretty funny. But those two guys, I think maybe this pitching staff goes with those two guys. As you can see, some of the numbers maybe a little bit more inflated than some guys would hope, but those two have been rock solid all season.
Yeah, it's one of those pitching staffs that has sort of been underspoken, almost to a certain extent, the same way that Saskatoon's has been, where it's a good offense and it's been able to carry the load, whereas the pitching staff hasn't had to do a lot per se, especially in that first half of the season when you're putting up 10, 12, 14 runs a game. It's kind of easy just to rear back and throw strikes and trust your defense a little bit. But to your point, Luis Diaz and Xander Roberts carried the load for this team. And that, as you look at across down this roster, there are a lot of guys who picked up some big innings, and it's going to be a matter of minimizing the mistakes for the defense. Don't allow an extra runner here or there, because Regina will take full advantage of that. They've got a good mix in that batting order that it's going to make it very difficult to get out of an inning if you do allow an extra base runner here and there. So Medicine Hat's probably going to be looking at this one going, we just need to batten down the hatches, do what we do well, focus on what made us successful in the regular season, and we'll be just fine.
It's gonna be a great series. I'm really excited for this one as well. I mean, all four, they all have their levels of intrigue. This one is kind of, reminding me of what we talked about with Lethbridge and Sylvan Lake. It's two teams that are very evenly matched, and it's going to be really fun to see who steps up, who becomes that X factor for either team. And
Mhm.
it all starts tonight at Athletic Park, like you said. Game one goes tonight in Medicine Hat. Game two at Curry Field in Regina on Thursday tomorrow night, and then game three, if necessary, back in Medicine Hat. We missed when I was talking about Weston Walls earlier. We missed the Player of the Week, and there was a lot of really good pitching performances again. But Weston Walls, look at this: 9 innings pitched, two hitters, 10 strikeouts. This is where I'm thinking about in terms of the playoffs. Why Weston Walls might be the type of guy who can take over a series just because of the workhorse type of guy he is, the strikeout kind of power that he has. Weston Walls could be that kind of guy, I think, Joe, and a great week from him.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the night before, a couple of nights before, he stepped in as a reliever against Regina and got lit up. It was very surprising to watch. And you're sitting there going, is this where Walls hits his wall? And he didn't, because the very next time he comes out to the yeah, I know, yeah, if there was only a wall sound effect that we could use, um he came out firing, and he goes up against Swift Current and just throws an absolute beauty of a game. And to your point, if you can get that out of a Weston Walls in the playoff, 9 times out of 10 going to win that ball game. And so that's going to be the key for Moose Jaws. Yeah, I assume he's going to start game one just because, hey, you go with your ace and try to set the tone right off the bat. But we're not privy to the starting lineups prior to as we're recording this. But I foresee, I wouldn't be shocked if we see a Reese Helland like appearance out of Weston Walls. Reese Helland in 2022 seemed to pitch every game. He was a starter one game, and then he'd come in as a reliever for the last 2 games of the series. And I see Weston Walls saying, "Just give me the ball. I'll go and throw until my arm falls off."
Yeah, just a quick story here. I don't know if this is going to go over some people's heads, but the senior men's provincials were this past weekend in Saskatoon, Joe. The same time the Berries had a couple home games, it was just the field next door at Lecos Field. So there's Karen's Field, and then Lecos is right next door. Cody Rock, who is a WMBL, I believe, alumni, who's around my age, he pitched the entire semifinal, and then they won that game for the Carlisle Cardinals, and then later that day pitched the entire final. And it's like, I how do people do it? I just don't. Especially when you get into your 30s, it's a whole lot different than when you're 20 and you just have rubber arm and it doesn't matter. But when you're in your 30s and he's still doing it, I mean, that guy's a stud. Cody Rock, shout out to him.
I play outfield once in a while, Clark, and I'll tell
But
you this: that once I throw once, my arm's ready to fall off. So I can't imagine throwing 100 plus pitches in two games in one day.
yeah, we're talking 200 plus here, I'm sure. But at the same time, he's a very efficient guy. So he might have kept it under 200 knowing Cody Rock, but very impressive either way. That's just a quick little anecdote as we move in to, we couldn't decide on one play of the week, Joe. So let's go with an East and a West. We'll start in the West. And maybe I'll let
With
you
what
kind of
appear to be
describe
new
this play
sneakers out
here.
on the mound, he heads this one to third.
Well, I got to say that third baseman Eric Matchy has their highlight reel as he comes in, grabs that throw, but I believe that's top of the ninth inning against Energy City back on Friday. Absolute beauty dive. And I got to give a shout out to Nash Kroll, who I believe is playing first base on that play. I think it's one of the most underrated aspects of a big out is the scoop. And if you caught that, if you go back to our YouTube channel, because we're going to be posting the actual play on there as well, or just hit rewind if you want to,
He heads this one
and
to third.
you'll see the scoop, very
Oh, play it again, Bryce.
Vladdy-esque. Uh, that we've got the beauty of replay. Watch it, just the nice little, here we go, the nice little Felix Potvin style glove save from Nash Kroll. So a beauty play out in Okotoks back on Friday night.
Love that. Always got to give some love to the first baseman. They never get enough credit. I always get really upset because as a first baseman myself, there's always that narrative that first baseman can't play defense, and it really bothers me. So I love pointing out the fact that Nash Kroll made a great scoop over there at first base. But in the East Division, another really important play in terms of timing. You mentioned the one in the West. This one was the top of the eighth. Medicine Hat was pressing, and this was a diving catch in right field by Ryan Dauphiny to save it was surely going to be a triple, especially because he dove for it. So if he would have missed that, we're talking about Medicine Hat making a comeback here. Weyburn was up by 1 run at that point late in the game, so that was a massive, massive catch. And Bryce, if we can play it one more time, I'm going to be quiet because John Prett for the Weyburn Beavers has a great call for this one. So Bryce, can you play it one more time for me?
And that's laced. What a play by Ryan Dauphiny! My word! He went horizontal and robbed Johnny Volcano of a triple.
There you go. So you just love the energy from John Prett, and you won't find a Weyburn sports fan much more involved than John Prett. So shout out to John. But again, two great plays. We'll post those on our YouTube channel. You can check those out later. Joe, there's some good alumni news. There always is every single week, but there's some really good stuff this week. What do you got for me?
Absolutely. And before I get there, just want to give one other shout out. You didn't see their logo enough. Pile of Bones, a sponsor as well for our play of the week this season. Fantastic stuff. And glad to be able to showcase them a couple of times for each highlight this time around. So kudos to our good friends over at Pile of Bones. Yeah, the alumni spotlights this week. Again, we usually do 3 here, and I'm going to give you 3. First off, Matt Lloyd, former Okotoks Dog, named the Canadian Baseball Network's Minor League Player of the Week again. That's his 3rd time doing so with the Memphis Redbirds in AAA. He's been quietly having himself a really solid season, and especially now that the trade deadline's over, we're looking at roster expansion coming up at the end of August here. Is there a possibility we hear Matt Lloyd getting called up to see maybe if he can hang out with the big boys in the MLB? Time will tell. He's got a really cool story, including basically missing a full season and almost not wanting to come back and play baseball again, going down to Mexico to play baseball, and then ends up getting a free agent contract in St. Louis. And the rest has been kind of history for him. A guy who gets the call up to Major League Baseball thanks to a major sell off. Minnesota Twins, in case you missed the news during the trade deadline, basically sold off their entire roster. And one guy that they decided to keep around as part of the rebuild happens to be a former Okotoks Dog and Edmonton prospect, now known as the Energy City Cactus Rats, Cody Funderburk, who's been in and out of the lineup with the Minnesota Twins over the last couple of years. He's now with the team again after getting called up. I believe it was July 25th. So good to see Cody back in the show. And finally, an update on a former almost Regina Red Sox, and I got to give credit to Clark on this one because he flagged it and said, "Hey, did he play here? Because he is Regina born and raised." Thomas Ireland was supposed to play with the Regina Red Sox in 2021. For those who need a brief history lesson, 2021 was the COVID abbreviated season where we only had 5 teams, excluding all of the Saskatchewan teams. So Thomas Ireland didn't actually play in the WCBL, but obviously a Regina native. He's been called up to AAA in, I believe it's Texas Rangers organization. So shout out to Thomas as he's been quietly making his way up the depth chart of a very good Texas Rangers team.
There you go. Awesome. Always love hearing the alumni shout outs and updates with those guys. But Joe, the big story, of course, as we talked about for the good majority of the show, is the 4 matchups that we're going to see. We'll throw the bracket up one more time for everybody because it all starts tonight. We're looking, of course, in Okotoks at Siemens Stadium. The Dogs take on the Bombers in game 1. Sylvan Lake at Gulls Field take on the Lethbridge Bulls. Saskatoon at Next Gen Patch at Cairns Field take on the Moose Jaw Miller Express. And Athletic Park will be the site for Medicine Hat versus Regina game 1. It all starts tonight. Yes. Thank you, Bryce. That's the perfect moment for that. And it all starts tonight at 7 p.m., Joe. So have your TV set, get your laptops out, get your Flow College subscriptions if you can't make it to the parks. But this is the time of year you need to get your tickets. You need to go out to the ballparks, support these boys for their last couple weeks here because it's all going to go very, very fast from here on. It's games 1, 2, and 3 are tonight, tomorrow, and Friday. Next round starts on Sunday. And then the final round, of course, starts midweek next week. So it's all going to go very, very, very fast. And this is the best time of year. We all love playoff baseball. Joe, final thoughts to you as we finish off the show.
I just have one note, and it's to one person and one person only. Dear Mother Nature, we've put up with your shenanigans all season long. I look out at I live in Airdrie. I'm planning on going to Sylvan Lake tonight, and I see clouds starting to roll in. Can you please just hold off on the rain for 2 weeks? That's all I'm asking. You've done your damage, or it's been good for the farmers. It's been good for my front lawn. But you know what? Baseball season's better when it's nice, warm, sunny, and a lot is on the line come playoff time.
Yeah, it's going to be a great time regardless. Well, Joe, thanks so much for joining me today. Of course, thanks for Bryce and Jordan in the back and Kelly for designing all our stuff over at IKS Media. Again, get your tickets, get your Flow College subscription. It's going to be some great baseball in the next couple weeks, and it's going fast. So don't wait. Get out to the park and enjoy it all. For Joe McFarland, I'm Clark Monroe. Enjoy the baseball, everyone. It's the best time of year.
Playoffs? Don't talk about it. Playoffs? You kidding me? Playoffs?